What's up, lovers? It's raining on a Wednesday in LA. It's gonna be raining tomorrow too. It's been raining for like 2 months here in LA. We can't handle it. It's too much. It's just too much for us to handle, and we can't drive in the rain, God forbid. But I'm almost at work. I had a little bit of a rant when it comes to music, so I'm gonna toot my own horn. I'm pretty good at predicting music trends. I would say with like a year before it comes out, 6 months before it comes out. And the interesting thing about music is it's very subtle, because we can all say it like from a long time ago, like Y2K moving up. You could predict that, like, okay, dance music's really hot. You started hearing that in pop music, where now DJs where we're collaborating with pop artists, but it really was like a house song. It was like an EDM song, but it's on the radio now. So like, I remember when I saw that coming, and then during COVID, I like saw the 80s synth sounds coming. And the way that it works, by the way, guys, is you'll hear it in indie artists, you'll hear it in artists that you have to really dig to go find, or they have just like a smaller following in general. But what happens is someone who's like an A-list artist, their producers grab the trend and then they make it super hot. So it's like the really refined version of the sound you were hearing in these other bands, which that's happened for forever. And smaller bands always feel like their sound's getting stolen. And that's really what that is the producers are getting influenced. They're also hearing these unique sounds or things that are getting like trendy and hot, and then they use it, and then we hear it and we think that that big artist did that sound first, which that's almost never the case. So in this aspect, and I'm ranting a little bit, I was waiting to find like who's gonna be the A-list artist that uses that sound that I'm talking about, that synth wave sound. And the first song that popped off was Blinding Lights. And then that was like #1 for forever. But after that, then what happens is all the other A-list artists copy that sound because they want to have that sound of the #1 hit. And then they all start having that 80s thing. Like there's an Ava Max song that sounds like that. There's a Sia song that sounds like that. Jonas Brothers, they all did it. But there's just one that pops off first, and it happened to be Blinding Lights. And then I started seeing the trend of, 90s grunge is gonna be kind of like the hot thing to integrate, and it always integrates in pop, by the way, just pop culture. That also now pop, by the way, is basically rap too, which is really interesting. But I was waiting to see like who's gonna pop off with the kind of grungy, I'm not even saying it right, it's not even grunge, it's like the Alanis Morissette, the Natalie Imbruglia Torn song. Like that's the sound that was popping off. And then it happened, and it was Olivia Rodrigo. And I remember when I heard that album, I was like, holy shit, like, this is so good. And everybody's gonna copy this sound right now. And it doesn't mean that her producer, Dan, I think his last name's Negro, was like the first one to do it. Everyone was doing it already. Like I heard it in all the smaller bands that I like, but I just knew like an A-list artist is gonna pop off, and she happened to pop off and turned into an A-list artist. But the new sound right now that I was hearing last year in smaller bands, and I was like, ooh, I wonder who's gonna do it. It's gonna happen. And then we're just gonna see it all 2023, because we go in moods, guys, when it comes to trends. Like for COVID time, we needed something like upbeat and uplifting. So like the 80s sound of like the like the Take On Me drum part, that's what we needed to get our shit together. So we were feeling that emotion, and we go like this. So right now, that last emotion, that kind of like Natalie Imbruglia Torn sound that Olivia Rodrigo was doing, that was really hot at the time, that's just morphing a little bit. So we're still in that moment of like, we want to be sad, but now we want to be sad and cool. And I'm explaining this really vaguely, and it sounds kind of stupid, but when you hear artists talk about the vibe of their song, they say very interesting things of how to describe a sound. And I'm just making it really, really simple. Of the sound right now is that Olivia Rodrigo sound, but also let's make it cool and underground. So what has that turned into? It's sounds from new wave artists. So the biggest one that people could think of is like The Cure, Boys Don't Cry, Love Song, I Will Always Love You. That guitar sound specifically, it's literally the guitar in new wave songs. It's the bass in new wave songs that sounds like really distorted and it almost sounds like a guitar, and in the song it sounds just like a guitar playing a riff, but it's a really prevalent guitar and bass sound that you're hearing. Yes, there's like a specific keyboard sound to it too, but what you're hearing right now with what's getting hot is that new wave bass sound and that new wave guitar. And this morning, guys, it's also like 7 a.m. Give me a break. I'm having a hard time talking, but I just wanted to get this out because I was like, I hear it in an A-list artist right now. So all the indie shit I listen to, everyone's doing it. It all kind of sounds the same, which is funny to me because everyone's just doing the same thing right now. It sounds exactly the same. Like they're literally trying to just sound like the Smiths and The Cure, which are two of my favorite bands of all time. So I'm very biased on this. So it's exciting to see that it's now going mainstream. And I just heard the guitar sound in the new Miley Cyrus song, Jaded. The song is fantastic. It's incredibly produced, by the way. And if you listen to it, just the way that the vocals pop out, the cleanliness of the bass sound right underneath it, it's just like carrying right underneath her voice. Like I could literally paint it where she's here, the bass is just right here, and then you're hearing the sprinkles of that guitar sound, bling, on the corners, and then everything else, the backups, whatever. But what happens in mainstream is they just take a piece of that trendy sound that's happening and they clean it up, where really, really good producers, they have a way of just making sounds pop out and knowing how to blend them. So a lot of indie artists, everything is now, to me, just sounding the same, where that song, you might listen to it without me having said any of this and being like, oh, that's just a good Miley Cyrus song. It's a nice little ballad. But what I hear is, yeah, they're hearing that new wave influence right now that's really hot, where we want to be like cool 90s, but like underground and hip, which turned into now going back to the 80s again, but specifically like that new wave kind of edgy vibe. And you're hearing it where I'll hear it on TikTok where people are like, oh, that Timothy Chalamet sound, which is fucking hilarious. But I really, really like it. And this is the end of my rant, but I'm telling you right now, you're gonna keep hearing it. During the like new wave synth phase, the other song that popped off, by the way, was Kid Laroi, Stay. And by the way, that song was hella old before he ever had that song pop off, before Justin Bieber ever got on it. I heard it like a year before it ever like was re-released. And that's just a good example of like, if you hear the old version, I think you can find it on YouTube somewhere. It wasn't so produced, but that synth sound was like the thing that made that song pop off. And it was that same Take On Me beat that I'm talking about. And right now, you're gonna keep hearing this specific new wave bass sound, really distorted bass that almost sounds like a guitar. And then you're gonna hear the new wave guitar. So Jaded, Miley Cyrus, it's the first time I heard it on a mainstream song right now. And I guarantee you're gonna hear it from every big artist coming up. There's a couple that I can't think of right now that I'm kind of hearing it get integrated, but this year, I'm just gonna predict it right now. For the summer, even though we always have summer jams, we're talking about like the sunshine and shit, I guarantee you that this is the sound for the summer.
Please press the button and take the parking ticket.